All right, folks, buckle up. We're diving deep today into some really interesting stuff about data and privacy. Who's really pulling the strings in this digital world we live in? We've got a really cool interview here with a cybersecurity expert, Amit Dubey, and there's some seriously thought-provoking stuff in here.
One of the things Dubé talks about that really stuck with me is this idea that we're all like products of the data that's been fed to us since we were born. It shapes our desires, our weaknesses, even our dreams.
It's kind of wild to think about, right? It's like
Mm.
we're all in this giant experiment, and the data we're exposed to is like the independent variable or something. But what really blew my mind was when Dubé revealed just how much information companies like Facebook are collecting on us. It's insane.
Oh yeah, it's a lot. They're tracking everything from our locations and, our financial records to stuff like our political and religious beliefs, our sexual orientation, our health info. They've even got access to our photos, videos, documents, the whole nine yards.
Okay, so we know Facebook collects data, right? But why should we be worried? Isn't this just how they personalize our experience?
Well, think about it this way. Facebook's not just collecting data, they're analyzing it to, predict and manipulate our behavior. They can use this information to like subtly nudge us towards certain choices, whether it's what we buy, what we watch, who we vote for, you name it.
Whoa, hold on. That sounds a little sci-fi, but I guess it makes sense. The more they know about us, the better they can like influence us. So are you saying that every time I like a post or click on an ad, I'm giving them more ammo to control my life?
Kinda, yeah. It's not just Facebook either. Tons of companies are doing the same thing. Our data's become this valuable commodity that's being traded and exploited for profit and, control. It's like a new form of currency in this digital age.
So you're saying our data is basically digital gold?
Pretty much.
Hmm. I never thought of it that way. But I mean, surely there's got to be some good that comes from all this data collection, right? Like, aren't there times when it can be used to help people?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, data can be incredibly powerful for things like, medical research, for developing new technologies. It can even help predict and prevent crime. But the key is finding a balance. How do we harness the benefits of data without sacrificing our privacy and autonomy?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
So Dubey also talks about the case of TikTok and WeChat,
hmm
which were both banned in India despite being hugely popular. What's the deal with that?
Well, it basically boils down to data security concerns. Both apps were collecting massive amounts of data on Indian users, which was being sent back to servers in China. And that raised red flags about, potential surveillance and control by the Chinese government.
Ah, so this is where the idea of data warfare comes in, right? It's not just companies competing for our information. It's entire countries battling for control through, like, data dominance.
You got it. The United States currently holds the most data globally, but China is working hard to catch up. They're super protective of their own data while simultaneously collecting as much as they can from other countries. It's like a global chess match, and data is the most valuable piece on the board.
This is getting intense. But then Dubey switches gears and talks about something I wouldn't have expected: the recent pager bomb attacks attributed to Hezbollah. Why on earth would a group like that use such outdated technology?
Well, that's what makes this story so interesting. Hezbollah chose pagers because they're way less vulnerable to hacking and offer a level of security that, modern smartphones just don't have.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that sometimes the simplest tools can be the most effective, especially when you're trying to avoid unwanted attention.
It's like they exploited a blind spot in our thinking about technology. We assume that newer is always better, but sometimes, you know, simplicity can be an advantage, especially when it comes to security.
Exactly. And it kind of brings up another important point. You don't need sophisticated hacking skills to create chaos in someone's life. Sometimes the most damaging attacks exploit, you know, vulnerabilities in our everyday systems.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, think about something as simple as repeatedly entering the wrong password for someone's bank account. It could lock them out of their funds and cause, serious problems, all without any technical expertise. Or imagine exploiting phone lock features to cut off someone's communication. These seemingly harmless actions can have a huge impact.
So we need to be more aware of how our actions can be used against us, even in everyday situations.
Right.
It's not just about guarding against, like, high-tech attacks. It's about recognizing the potential for manipulation in everyday life.
Right. And this leads us to the question of ethical hacking. Dubey talks about the difference between malicious hacking and using those same skills to protect systems and catch criminals.
It's like the difference between a supervillain and a superhero, right? Both have extraordinary powers, but one uses them for evil and the other uses them for good. But how does someone actually become an ethical hacker? Isn't hacking illegal?
That's a common misconception. Hacking itself is illegal, but ethical hackers operate within legal boundaries. They use their knowledge to help law enforcement, protect systems, and find vulnerabilities before the bad guys can exploit them.
So it's all about using your powers responsibly.
Exactly.
But this world of ethical hacking sounds pretty complex. Where does someone even begin?
Well, that's a question we can delve into later. But first, let's explore another shadowy corner of the digital world, the dark web.
Ooh, now things are getting really interesting. The dark web always seemed like something straight out of a spy movie. What makes it so different from the regular internet?
Think of it this way. WikiLeaks aim for transparency, right? But the dark web thrives on anonymity and criminal activity. It's like a marketplace for stolen data, a haven for blackmailers, a breeding ground for all sorts of shady stuff.
It's like a digital underworld where anything goes.
Pretty much.
But doesn't it all seem a bit abstract? How does the dark web actually impact our lives?
Imagine waking up one morning and finding your bank account drained, your identity stolen, your personal information plastered all over the internet. That's the reality for tons of victims of data breaches that start on the dark web.
Yikes, that's a scary thought. So we've got companies collecting our data, countries battling for data dominance, and a hidden digital underworld where criminals can do whatever they want. It's enough to make you want to unplug and go live off the grid. But before we spiral, let's talk about something a little closer to home, those home CCTV systems that are everywhere these days, especially those cheap Wi-Fi-enabled cameras.
You've hit on an important point. While those cameras offer a sense of security, there's a hidden cost. Often, that free app and cheap hardware mean your data is the product. Your footage is likely being sent to servers, a lot of which are in China where it's stored and, potentially exploited.
Wait, so even in the privacy of my own home, I'm being watched? But isn't that a bit paranoid? I mean, why would anyone want to watch my cat sleep on the couch?
It might seem harmless, but remember, every piece of data can be analyzed and used for purposes beyond its original intent. That footage of your living room could be used to build a profile of your habits, your lifestyle, even your vulnerabilities. And that information is valuable to marketers, advertisers, even criminals.
Okay, now I see the bigger picture. It's not just about individual cameras or companies. It's about this whole network of devices collecting and sharing our data, often without our knowledge. But what's even more unsettling is the thought that someone could be watching us live through these unsecured cameras.
Absolutely. Have you ever heard of Shodan? It's a search engine that can reveal unsecured cameras all over the world. Anyone can use it to peek into our homes and businesses.
Whoa, really? So someone could be watching me right now through my own security camera. That's terrifying.
It's a reminder that the technology we bring into our homes can also be used against us. And remember, it's not just about the images themselves, it's about the information they contain. Seemingly unimportant details can be used to build a profile, gain trust, and manipulate people. Remember that story we talked about earlier, the kidnapping, where small details from a photo were used to create a believable story?
Oh yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah.
They used things like the victim's watch and a keychain to gain their family's trust. It's a reminder that visual data can be used as a weapon.
That's why it's so important to be aware of the potential for misuse. In this hyper-connected world, data is power. Understanding how it's collected, used, and abused is crucial for navigating the digital landscape safely and responsibly.
This has been mind-blowing, seriously. But what do we do with all this information? Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll go even deeper into the implications of all this and explore how you can protect yourself in this data-driven world. Okay, so we're back. And honestly, my head is spinning a little bit after that last segment. It feels like our information is everywhere and it's a bit overwhelming. What can we actually do to protect ourselves in a world where data is constantly being collected and, traded like it's some kind of commodity?
Well, the first step is just awareness, right?
Yeah.
We need to understand how valuable our data is and start being more conscious of how we're giving it away, often without even realizing it.
Okay, I get it. Knowledge is power. But where do we even begin? I feel like every app, website, even my favorite coffee shop wants a piece of my information.
It's true, data's basically become the currency of the digital age, but we often hand it over without really understanding what it means. Think about those, free services we talked about earlier. Are they really free? Or is our data the price we pay for that convenience?
You're right. There's no such thing as a free lunch, right? Like those personality quizzes that tell you what fictional character you are, They might seem harmless, but they can be pretty sneaky about gathering data about our personalities, our interests, even our vulnerabilities.
Exactly. That harmless little quiz could be feeding a data-hungry algorithm that's building a whole profile on you. And that information can be used for things like targeted advertising, content recommendations, or even, more manipulative stuff.
So it's not just about being careful about what we post online. It's about being mindful of all the little ways we give away our information. It's like a digital minefield out there.
That's one way to put it. But it's not about living in fear or becoming like a tech expert overnight. It's about taking some small practical steps to regain control of our digital lives.
Okay, so where do we start? Give us the cheat sheet.
One good place to begin is just being more picky about the apps and services we use. Do you really need that new social media app, or can you stick with the ones you already trust?
That's a good point. I have a terrible habit of downloading any new app that looks remotely interesting.
And before you hit download, take a minute to read the privacy policy. Yeah, I know, they're long and boring, but they can tell you a lot about how your data will be used.
Okay, read the privacy policies. Check. What else?
Another simple but super effective step is managing your privacy settings. Most social media platforms let you control what information you share publicly, who can see your posts, even what data they collect on you.
So spend some time exploring those settings and lock things down.
Exactly. And while you're at it, check the permissions you've given to different apps. Do they really need access to your location, your contacts, your microphone? If not, revoke those permissions.
This is making me realize just how much control we've given away without even thinking about it. It's like we've invited these digital vampires into our homes and handed them the keys to the blood bank.
Huh. That's a good one. But the good news is we have the power to take back control. And speaking of those home security cameras, the ones we talked about earlier, there are ways to use them without sacrificing your privacy.
Okay, tell me more. How can we enjoy the benefits of home security without becoming part of some global surveillance network?
First things first, choose reputable brands with strong security protocols. Look for cameras that offer end-to-end encryption.
Wait, hold on. Remind me what that means again?
Sure. End-to-end encryption basically means that only you have the key to decrypt the footage. So even if someone manages to intercept the data, they can't view it without the encryption key. It's like having a secret code.
So even if my camera gets hacked, the footage is useless to them without the key.
Exactly. And equally important, change those default passwords. Use strong, unique passwords for both your camera and your Wi-Fi network. It sounds simple, but it can make a huge difference for your security.
Strong passwords. Got it. But even if we do everything right, there's always a risk of a data breach, isn't there? Seems like we hear about these massive hacks all the time.
It's true. No system is perfect. But there are things we can do to minimize the damage if a breach does happen. Have you ever considered using a password manager?
I've heard of them, but I've always been a bit hesitant. Isn't it kind of risky to put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak?
I get it. It's a common concern. But think of it this way. Is it more secure to have one really strong lock protecting all your valuables or a bunch of weak locks that can easily be picked?
Okay, that makes sense. So a password manager is like a digital vault for all my passwords.
Exactly. It generates and stores strong, unique passwords for all your accounts and uses encryption to keep them safe. It's much more secure than trying to remember a million different passwords or, even worse, writing them down on a sticky note.
You've convinced me. Password manager, added to the list. But let's face it, even the best technology can't protect us from our own mistakes. What about those phishing scams? The ones that trick people into giving away their personal information.
Phishing scams are a huge problem, and they're getting more and more sophisticated all the time. The key is to stay vigilant and be skeptical.
I'm usually pretty good at spotting them, but I know a lot of people who've fallen victim. What are some red flags to watch out for?
Always double-check the sender's address. Hover over links before you click on them to make sure they lead to a legitimate website. And be wary of any unsolicited requests for your personal information. If something feels off, trust your gut.
So it's all about being aware and thinking before you click or share anything online.
Exactly. And here's another important one. Keep your software updated. Those annoying update notifications are actually really important. They patch security holes and protect your devices from the latest threats.
Talking about all of this is actually making me feel a lot more in control. It's not about being some kind of tech genius. It's about being aware, taking practical steps, and, taking back control of our digital lives.
That's the spirit. Knowledge is power. The more we understand about the digital landscape, the better equipped we are to navigate it safely and responsibly.
All right, welcome back to the final part of our deep dive. Man, it's been a wild ride, huh? We've talked about data collection, the potential for things to go wrong, and even dipped our toes into that whole dark web thing. But most importantly, we've been talking about some practical things you could do to protect yourself in this crazy digital world.
One thing that really stands out to me is that this isn't a one and done conversation, right? This digital landscape is constantly changing, so we got to stay informed. It's like learning a new language. You have to keep practicing and learning new words to really be fluent.
So it's not enough to just listen to this and call it a day. What are some good places to go to stay up to date on all this data security and privacy stuff?
Oh, there are some great organizations out there doing amazing work. The Electronic Frontier Foundation, the EFF, is a fantastic resource for learning about your digital rights and how to protect your privacy online. They've got a ton of info on their website, and they're constantly fighting for stronger privacy laws.
EFF. Okay, I'll check them out. Anything else?
Absolutely. There's also the National Cybersecurity Alliance, the NCA. They offer some really practical tips and advice for individuals and businesses, and they even have a program called Stay Safe Online. It's all about, helping people stay safe in the digital world.
NCA. Got it. This is super helpful.
Yeah.
But thinking back to everything we've talked about, I feel like we barely scratched the surface. There's so much more to learn about this whole world of data.
You're right, there is. And that's what makes it so fascinating. The more you learn, the more you realize how much there is to discover. But the big takeaway here is that knowledge is power. The more we understand about how data is collected and used and, potentially misused, the better we can protect ourselves.
It's like we're detectives in some kind of digital mystery, constantly looking for clues and trying to piece together the puzzle of data and control.
I like that. And remember, we're not in this alone. There are tons of people and organizations out there fighting for better digital literacy, stronger privacy laws, and new tools to keep our data safe.
Well, this whole deep dive has been a real eye-opener. I've learned so much about data and why it's so important to be careful in this digital age. But more than anything, I feel like I can actually do something to protect my own data.
And that's what we hope to achieve with these conversations, to empower you to take control of your digital life and make informed choices about your data.
So what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
Be mindful, be curious, be proactive. Your data is valuable, and you have the right to control how it's used.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to ask questions, challenge assumptions, and demand transparency from the companies that collect your information.
Well said. It's been an incredible journey, and we're so glad you joined us for this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe out there in the digital world.